In this video, we're going to add sound to our game. We're going to add sound for the thrusters of the player's ship, our projectiles, as well as an explosion sound for our asteroids. So the three sounds that we're going to be using, two of which come from a site right here. So go ahead and grab any one that you want for those particular effects that you're looking for. We grabbed the engine noise and the explosion from the site, but we did not redistribute them in the assets package, as I do not believe we are licensed to do so. So go ahead and grab them there. From here, they have very permissive indie license, so you guys are all good to go with that. The projectile effect was created by Mr. Steve, so blame him if you don't like it. And it also means that we can put it in our assets package. So let's start off with importing our three sounds. So I'm going to go to Project, I'm going to hit Create, and I'm going to create a new folder called Sounds. Inside of Sounds, I'm going to drop in my projectile, explosion, and engines sound files. So engines, explosion, and projectile. And I'm just going to dump them right into that sounds folder. Now inside of sounds folder, I want to go ahead and make sure that my projectile is not imported as a 3D sound. That's because our projectiles are already designed to sound like they're moving away from the player, and we don't want to conflict with the way Unity simulates 3D sound effects with Doppler and all that fun stuff. Okay, so there's three different techniques that we're going to show how to add sounds into the game. The easiest one is the one-shot audio. We're going to use that to do our sounds for our projectiles. So coming into Visual Studio, I am going to jump into my projectile weapon class. And my projectile weapon class will have a public reference to an audio clip. Now, an audio clip in Unity references the asset that contains audio information. So it's fairly aptly named. It is different from an audio source. An audio source is a component we attach onto our game objects to make them emit sound. But what we want to do here in the case of the projectile weapon is we want to go ahead and use one of the simplest APIs that Unity has for working with sound, that will basically allow us to, with a single line of code, create a game object at a specified position, attach an audio source to it, and then attach a clip to that source, and then make sure to destroy the noise, the object that's responsible for making that noise, when it's done playing at least once. So what I'm going to do here in the code is I will, after the cooldown check, before we instantiate the projectile, I'm going to say audio source dot play clip at point sound position. So this will play our awesome projectile sound at the position that we specified. That's as easy as, well, you can make it. I am also going to supply the third parameter here as a maybe 0.4f for the volume, just to lower it down relative to the other noises that we will have in the game.
It sounds like fun.
Yes. So jumping back into Unity, I'm going to go to Prefabs, I'm going to open up Basic Weapons, and I'm going to select my Level 1 projectile, and I'm going to bring my projectile effect onto my audio clip property. And then I'm going to hit play and see if we can get it picked up. And we do.
I'll trust you because I can't hear any of this.
Oh, that's all right. Okay, so we do indeed have audio on our projectile, and it was as simple as that. But there are different ways of working with audio in Unity, like I said before. An alternative is to add the audio source directly on a component in your game. That's a very appropriate thing to do in the case of when you have an audio, like a looping audio sound, that's redundant, but you guys know what I mean, that's attached to an object, which sounds pretty much exactly what we're going to do with our thrusters. So I'm going to go to my player, and I'm going to add the component of audio source. For my audio source, I'm going to make sure I check loop because this will be the sound of our thrusters. And I'm simply going to click and drag engines onto the audio clip property. And everything else is fine. I don't need to edit any of these other settings. And then I'm going to come here at the top and hit apply so we make sure that our new audio source component gets applied to all the ships in all of our scenes. And then I'm going to hit play. And we now have a thruster sound. But you know what? We can do better than that.
But wait, there's more.
There is. I want to actually change the pitch of the thrusters depending on how fast you're going relative to the max velocity of the ship. So let's go ahead and jump back into our code and look at our player class. Now on my player class, we do instantiate our controller, which is responsible for handling things like velocity. So we need information from the controller in order to update some sort of audio on our player. Now, I certainly could create another component on my player responsible for handling audio, but because there's really only one thing that needs audio, I'm just going to kind of dump it inside of this class, and you'll see why. It's incredibly simple. However, it will require that my player has a reference to the specific audio source. So I'm going to say public audio source engine audio. Now you might be wondering why I don't use the get component method here. I could have simply said var audio equals get component audio source. I even could just simply type in audio dot and it'll get an audio source out of my game object. The reason I'm not doing that here, however, is for audio, I don't think that's the best solution because you can actually have multiple audio sources attached to the same game object. So by making it explicitly its own public field, I can tie a specific audio source into this parameter without having to either randomly get an audio source out of my player or get the first one. However, the get component behavior deals with conflicts. Now, before I actually go ahead and wire up my engine audio property, I will jump down to my update method. And I'll jump down to the end of it, and I'll update the pitch of my engine audio. So I'll say engine audio.pitch equals, and I want this to be a number between 0 and 1, depending on how fast the player is going. It's actually very easy to compute. I can simply do controller current velocity divided by controller minimum velocity plus controller max variable velocity plus controller afterburner modifier. So this will give us a number between 0 and 1 that represents how fast the player is going relatively to its maximum velocity.
Very cool.
So the last step, of course, is to jump back into Unity and actually hook the audio source up into the player script. So I'm going to expand the player script and I'm going to click and drag audio source onto my engine audio property. And I will also go ahead and make sure to hit apply so that that change is applied to all of my players. Now when I hit play, you'll hear that the pitch indeed does change depending on how fast we are going. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is slightly more complicated. We are going to be adding explosions to our asteroids.
You mean you can get more slick than we already have? That's amazing.
Well, what I'm going to do though is I want to change the this is the reason why I want to show this is the common problem that you will face. For the asteroids, I want to make there be a sound when I shoot them and they explode. Obviously, that's what we're going for. We're going for that explosion sound, but we're going to run into a couple of problems. First of all, I can't just attach an audio source to an asteroid. The reason I can't do that is, if you recall, the asteroids are reused. So what's going to happen is if I add that audio source onto that asteroid, I play it when it's destroyed, the asteroid manager might very well move the asteroid somewhere else, or, in fact, the asteroid manager disables the asteroid entirely when it is destroyed. So that rules out the ability for us to actually have
Stop having fun playing.
Yeah, sorry. That rules out the possibility of our asteroids using an audio source directly attached to the game object. Now, we could use something like the one-shot audio, which does exactly what we want it to. It creates a game object, it attaches a audio source to it, and it destroys it when the clip is done playing. But it doesn't give us enough control over the audio source itself, because there is one parameter in particular that needs to change. Because the explosions are a 3D sound, the location of the explosion matters significantly. If I look at the parameters of my audio source, you'll notice that I can control the volume, but only up to 1. So 1 is that clip playing at maximum volume. What I need to be able to do, however, is I need to be able to change the volume roll-off and just the volume roll-off in this case. And potentially the max distance, although I think 500 should be fine. But what I want to do is I want to change the volume roll-off to linear roll-off, which is slightly less realistic, but it will make it so our ship can actually hear the sounds made by the explosion, as opposed to them rolling off way too soon. But, like I said, I can't change that parameter of a one-shot audio. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is to go ahead and create our own one-shot audio implementation that gives us control over things like the roll-off or the other parameters of the audio source. To do that, I'm going to go back into Visual Studio. I'm just going to jump into my my utilities class. I can't remember what I called that. Utilities. Where'd I put that? Game extensions. I called it game extensions, not utilities. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I will add a method that allows me to return a new audio source created in a new game object that will allow me to configure it in any way that I want. So it'll work exactly like play clip at point, except it'll give me a lot more control. So I'm going to say public static audio source. How about just play clip at point? Sounds straightforward enough. Vector3 position and audio clip clip. Now what this is going to do is it's going to instantiate a game object. So I'm going to say var game object equals new game object. Let's just call this one-shot audio, I guess, just like the other one does. And then I'm going to say var source equals game object dot add component audio source. Then I'm going to say source dot clip equals clip. And then I'm going to say game object dot transform dot position equals position. And then I'm going to return source. So this basically does what play clip at point does already, but it gives us more control because it returns the audio source directly out of it, which will allow us to change the roll-off mode. So let's go ahead and write the code for the asteroid's explosion. I'm going to go back to asteroid.cs and I'm going to scroll all the way to the top, and I want to give it a public audio clip explosion clip. I don't think that's how you spell explosion, is it? I can't think it.
You have an extra I in there.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Nice.
Okay, so now we have our explosion clip. I'm going to scroll down to where we get destroyed, which is our destroyed method. I'm going to say var source equals game extensions dot play clip at point transform dot position, which is the position of the asteroid, and I'm going to pass an explosion clip. Then I'm going to say source dot roll off mode equals roll off mode linear, or audio roll off mode linear. So by doing that, we now have more control over the source, and we can change other parameters here too if we wanted to. So jumping back into Unity, I'm going to find my asteroid prefab, and there should now be an explosion clip property on it, which there is, and I can simply click and drag explosion onto that. Now if I hit play, whoops, I hit the revert button on the player and to undo some changes, and it lost the connection to the camera.
We lost our camera.
Yeah, that's easy enough to fix. Okay, here we go.
Does it?
And we don't have any audio because of the one method I forgot to invoke, which is one of the most straightforward methods that you might expect on an audio source, and that is the play method. I also forgot to destroy the game object when it was done playing. Now, this is something that's actually pretty straightforward to do inside of Unity if you know beforehand how long something should last. Now, you might be thinking, oh, do we have to do something similar to what we did with the particle system, where we had that script that attached onto the particle system game object and automatically destroyed itself when the particle system was done? And the answer is no. Because we already know the length of the clip, so we know exactly when to destroy it. And if we look at object.destroy, it has an overload that takes in a wonderfully single character named parameter called t, which is short for time, which is the time in which the object will be destroyed. So I can simply say game object, comma, clip.length. Then I can finish up this method by simply saying source.play, and we will have noise. And indeed we do.
Yay! I say yay only because I trust you.
Nope, I can hear it. Alright, so that's pretty much all we have to do to put together sound. There's a lot more stuff we can do with sound in Unity, but really we just threw in some pretty simple noises just to show the general process involved in making sound happen in the game engine. So,
Well, and we wanted it to be a kind of arcadey game, so it's not like it's going to be a soundscape.
yeah. Okay, so I think that just about wraps things up, and we'll see you guys in the next video.